Truck driver was fired for giving elderly woman a ride, but the next day, Jason Miller wiped the sweat from his brow as he looked at the dark road ahead. The rain hammered on the truck's windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. He had been driving for 12 hours, hauling a load of construction materials from Chicago to rural Indiana, when he saw something that made his heart sink. There she was, an elderly woman with completely white hair, soaked to the bone, shivering by the highway. Jason didn't need to think twice. He carefully stepped on the brake to avoid skidding on the wet road and pulled the truck over onto the shoulder. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he shouted through the window, trying to make himself heard over the noise of the storm. The woman turned her face to him, and even in the partial darkness lit only by the truck's headlights, Jason could see the desperation in those tired eyes. "Sir, please, I need to get to Indianapolis Memorial Hospital. My Edward is there, and they said I need to hurry." Jason got out of the truck, the rain soaking his blue uniform in seconds. He opened the passenger door and helped the woman up, noticing how she trembled uncontrollably. "I'll take you, don't worry." "But sir, won't it be a problem? I heard you're not allowed to give rides. You have an emergency. That's more important than any rule," Jason replied, turning the heater on full blast. What Jason didn't know was that, a few yards back, another vehicle had witnessed the whole scene. Richard Barnes, the logistics company supervisor, had been following Jason for miles on a surprise inspection. It was the kind of thing he loved doing, catching drivers off guard, looking for any slip-up to demonstrate his power. Richard sped up his car and overtook the truck, signaling for Jason to stop. The trucker's heart sank when he recognized the company vehicle. "Stay inside, ma'am. Let me handle this," Jason said, trying to keep his voice calm. He got out into the rain again and went to meet Richard, who was already getting out of his car with a smug expression on his face. "Jason Miller," the supervisor yelled, pointing an accusing finger. "You know very well that giving rides is prohibited. It's in the company rules from day one." "Mr. Richard, I know, but the lady has an emergency. She needs to get to the hospital. I don't want to hear excuses. Rules are rules." Richard stepped closer, his face red with anger. "Give me the truck keys now." "Sir, please, just let me take her to—" "The keys, Jason. You're fired. Get out of this truck immediately." The elderly woman got out of the truck, her weak legs almost giving way in the mud on the shoulder. "Please, sir, it was my fault. I begged him to give me a ride. My Edward is in the hospital and—" "You, get out of that truck now," Richard ordered, without looking at her. "And you, Jason, hand over that key before I call the police." Jason felt his throat tighten. That job meant everything to him. It had taken him 3 years to get the position at the logistics company, and he paid all the bills for his widowed mother in Hammond with that salary. But he looked at the wet, shivering woman and made his decision. "Okay, Mr. Richard, I'll hand over the key, but first I'm going to call a taxi for the lady. She's not staying here in the rain." "You're not doing anything!" Richard shouted. "Give me that key now, or I'll call the police myself and say you're with the company vehicle." Jason took a deep breath, took the keys out of his pocket, and handed them over. Richard snatched them from his hand with a cruel smile. "Great. Now get out of here, and you can start looking for another job because I'll make sure no logistics company in this region hires you." The supervisor got into the truck and drove off, leaving Jason and the elderly woman alone by the roadside under the relentless storm. Mrs. Margaret held Jason's arm with her trembling hands. "Young man, I'm so sorry. You lost your job because of me." "It's not your fault at all," replied Jason, trying to think of a solution. He grabbed his phone and realized he only had $150 in his wallet, his last money, until the paycheck he would never receive. "I'll call a taxi for you, don't worry." "But young man, I can't pay." "I'll pay. You need to get to the hospital." Jason called the only cab driver he knew in that area, Frank, an older man who sometimes gave drivers rides into the city when trucks needed maintenance. "Frank, it's Jason. I need a big favor." Half an hour later, the taxi arrived. Jason handed all his money to the driver. "Please, take her to the Indianapolis Regional Hospital. Is this enough?" "It is, Jason, but what about you, kid? How will you get back?" "I'll manage. Just take her, please." Mrs. Margaret tightly grasped Jason's hands. "Young man, I don't even know your full name." Jason Miller, ma'am, and you don't need to thank me. Hurry, your Edward is waiting. The woman got into the taxi, but before closing the door, she said something that Jason would take days to fully understand. My name is Margaret Wilson, and young man, sometimes things aren't what they seem. God bless you for your kindness. The taxi drove away and Jason stood there, completely soaked, jobless, penniless, miles from home. He picked up his phone and called his mother. Mom, it's me. Look, something happened here. Jason walked almost 2 miles along the highway until he found a gas station. The attendant, feeling sorry for him, let him stay under the covered area until dawn. Throughout that sleepless night, Jason wondered if he had done the right thing. Yes, helping the woman was correct, but now what? How would he pay the rent? How would he help his mother with the expensive high blood pressure medication? At daybreak, he managed to get a ride with a familiar truck driver to Hammond. The trip back was silent. Jason lost in his thoughts, mentally calculating how long his small savings would last. He arrived home around 10 in the morning. His mother, Mrs. Sharon, was already waiting at the door of the small apartment. Jason, my son, are you okay? I was worried all night. I am, Mom. Just tired. You did the right thing, my son. I raised you to have a good heart. We'll figure out the money. Jason hugged his mother, feeling the exhaustion of the whole situation weighing on his shoulders. He took a hot shower, changed clothes, and lay down in bed. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying the scene of Richard yelling, the woman trembling in the rain, the feeling of the keys being snatched from his hand. It was almost noon when persistent knocks on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Jason went to the door expecting it to be a neighbor or maybe a delivery person. When he opened it, he froze. There was Mrs. Margaret, the woman from the previous night, now in dry, clean clothes, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man around 60, wearing a subtle but good-quality suit. Mrs. Margaret. Jason could barely hide his surprise. Are you all right? You're Edward. May I come in, Jason? We have a lot to talk about. Jason stepped aside, still confused, and invited them in. Mrs. Sharon appeared from the kitchen, also surprised by the visitors. Mom, this is the lady I helped yesterday. Come in, said Mrs. Sharon, always hospitable. I'll make some coffee. Everyone settled into the small room. The man in the suit introduced himself. My name is Daniel Stewart. I'm a lawyer and a longtime friend of Mrs. Margaret. Jason, I need to tell you something, began Mrs. Margaret, her voice firm but gentle. First, thank you for yesterday. You don't know how much that help meant. How is your Edward? Mrs. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. My Edward passed away 2 weeks ago, Jason. He had a heart condition, fought hard, but he didn't make it. Yesterday I was returning from a special visit I make every week. My car broke down on the road, my phone died, and that storm started. I panicked because I needed to get home. I was feeling very sick. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Margaret, said Jason, moved by the story. But there's something you need to know. When that man fired you, when he yelled at me and you, I recorded everything on my phone. Jason's eyes widened. You recorded it? Yes. Look, she showed the video on her phone. The recording was perfect, capturing the whole scene, Richard shouting, the humiliation, everything. I always record when I travel alone. It's a safety measure I learned from my granddaughters. I never thought it would be useful like this. But why did you come looking for me? Because injustice can't go unpunished, Jason, and because I need to tell you who I am. Mrs. Margaret took a deep breath. I worked for 42 years as an administrative secretary at the headquarters of Midwest Freight Logistics. Do you know it? Jason felt a shock. Midwest Freight? It's one of the largest in the Midwest. Exactly, and the company you worked for is a branch of it. I know the owner personally, Mr. Robert Thompson. I worked directly with him for decades before retiring 5 years ago. But what does that mean? The lawyer Daniel leaned forward. It means, young Jason, that we have evidence of wrongful termination. But more than that, Mrs. Margaret told me that this supervisor, Richard Barnes, has a history of abuse with other drivers. Yes, he does, confirmed Jason, memories of stories he'd heard in the truck yard coming back to mind. Several colleagues have complained about him. He fires people for anything, yells at everyone, makes up rules that aren't even in the contract." "Exactly what I thought," said Mrs. Margaret. "Jason, I came here to propose something. Let's go to the company. Let's show this video and demand justice." "But Mrs. Margaret, with all due respect, Mr. Richard said he would blacklist me in the industry. If I show up there causing trouble, it will be even worse." "It will be the opposite, my son," the lawyer intervened. "With this video, we have evidence of harassment, wrongful termination, and humiliation. And more, with Mrs. Margaret's influence with the company owner, we can go far beyond just getting your job back." Jason looked at his mother, who was holding his hands. "My son, these people came here to help you. Don't let this injustice pass." "There's one more thing, Jason," said Mrs. Margaret, her voice becoming more serious. "On the way here, I got a call. It seems your Mr. Richard is already spreading lies about you." "What kind of lies?" "He's saying you abandoned the truck on the road, that you stole fuel, that you were driving drunk. He's trying to get ahead, create a narrative that protects him." Anger rose like hot lava in Jason's chest. "That's a lie. I never did any of that." "I know, my son. That's exactly why we need to act quickly," said Mrs. Margaret. "Daniel, explain it to him." "Jason, I'll be direct. We need to confront this man today. The more time passes, the harder it is to prove the truth. He's probably already altering reports, fabricating evidence against you. But I can't afford a lawyer." "You won't pay anything," interrupted Daniel. "I'm doing this out of friendship for Mrs. Margaret, and because I hate injustice." Jason looked at the three faces around him, all waiting for his decision. Life had taught him to be cautious, not to get into trouble bigger than he could handle. But it had also taught him that silence in the face of injustice was complicity. "All right, let's do it." Mrs. Margaret smiled, an expression of relief and determination. "Great. Daniel, you drive. Jason, grab your company documents, anything you have." The trip to the logistics company headquarters took an hour. During the ride, Mrs. Margaret told more of her story. "You know, Jason, when I started working at Midwest Freight Logistics in 1981, I was a young, recent widow with 2 small children to raise. My Edward, who was my fiancé at the time, had just passed away in an accident. It was Mr. Robert who gave me a chance when no one else would. He was just an owner of 3 old trucks, trying to build a business. We grew together, the company and us." "You must have seen a lot," commented Jason. "I have. I saw the company grow from 3 trucks to a fleet of 200 vehicles. I saw Mr. Robert get married, have children, face crises. And all that time he always said one thing: people are what matter. Trucks we can buy, but people with character are rare." "Then why is a supervisor like Richard there?" "Good question," replied Mrs. Margaret, and her expression darkened. "When I retired 5 years ago, things were changing. Mr. Robert's son, Michael, was taking on more responsibilities, and he was the one who hired Richard." "Is his son different?" "Very different. Michael only cares about numbers, about profit. He doesn't care about people, and I'm almost sure something wrong is happening there." Daniel nodded. "Mrs. Margaret told me her suspicions. There are rumors of embezzlement, of fraud. Nothing proven yet, but—" "Do you think Richard is involved in this?" "I think he's a key piece," said Mrs. Margaret, "and that's exactly why this situation is more delicate than it seems." They arrived at the logistics company in the middle of the afternoon. The yard was full of trucks, some being loaded, others parked. Jason felt a tightness in his chest, seeing that place where he had worked with so much pride. "Let's go," said Daniel, adjusting his tie. The 3 entered the administrative building. The receptionist, Melissa, widened her eyes, seeing Jason. "Jason, you shouldn't be here. Mr. Richard said that." "Said what, Melissa?" The young woman lowered her voice, looking nervously around. "Said you were fired for theft, that if you show up here to call security." "That's a lie, Melissa, and you know it." "I know, but—" She stopped, seeing Mrs. Margaret approach. "Mrs. Margaret? Is that you?" "Hi, Melissa, dear. Still working here, that's good." "Mrs. Margaret, you disappeared after you retired. I missed you so much." "I know, dear, but now I'm back and I need to speak urgently with whoever is in charge here. Mr. Michael is in his office, but Mr. Richard is there too, and he's in a terrible mood today." Even better, said Mrs. Margaret, heading toward the stairs. Jason and Daniel followed her. They went up to the second floor where the management offices were. When they reached Michael's office door, Mrs. Margaret didn't knock. She simply opened it and entered. Michael Thompson was sitting behind a huge desk, talking on the phone. He was a man in his early 30s, too much hair gel, too expensive a suit. Next to him, in a chair, was Richard. The two looked at the door with shocked expressions. "I'll call you back," said Michael, hanging up the phone. "Mrs. Margaret, what a surprise, and—" He looked at Jason, his eyes narrowing. "You're the driver who—" "That Mr. Richard fired yesterday for giving an elderly woman a ride in an emergency," completed Mrs. Margaret, her voice sharp. "Yes, that driver, and that woman is me." The silence that followed was tense. Richard rose from his chair, his face red. "Mrs. Margaret, with all due respect, but this is none of your business. You no longer work here." "Sit down, Richard," ordered Mrs. Margaret, and there was something in her voice that made the man obey. "Michael, I need to talk to you about unacceptable practices happening at this branch." Michael leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the table. "Look, Mrs. Margaret, I deeply respect the work you did for my father, but things have changed. We have rules now, procedures, and that driver broke a clear rule." "He saved a person's life," countered Mrs. Margaret. "He gave a ride, which is expressly prohibited for safety and insurance reasons." "And do you have exceptions for medical emergencies in the procedures manual, or don't you?" asked Daniel, joining the conversation. "I'm a lawyer, Mr. Michael, and I read the company manual before coming here. Page 42, third paragraph, in cases of proven medical emergency, the driver may, at his discretion, provide assistance, including transportation to a safe location." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "He didn't notify the base before acting, because the woman was in imminent danger," replied Jason, speaking for the first time. "And because it was night, raining heavily, there was no cell signal." "Lie," said Richard. "I was right behind you. There was a signal." "You were?" asked Mrs. Margaret, picking up her phone. "Interesting. So you saw an elderly woman, wet, shivering from cold on the side of the road, saw a driver stop to help, and instead of offering help too, you decided to wait hidden to later fire the man who was doing the right thing." "I was doing my job." "You were abusing power," corrected Daniel, "and we have proof of that." Mrs. Margaret showed the phone. "I recorded everything, Richard. Every word, every shout, every humiliation. And I've already sent copies to 3 different people in case something happens to my phone." Richard's face paled. That's illegal. You can't record me without permission." "Actually, I can. We were in a public space. There was no expectation of privacy, and besides, it serves as evidence of moral harassment and abuse of power." Michael stood up, his hands flat on the table. "Look, let's all calm down. Mrs. Margaret, I respect you, but this is an internal company matter, and Richard is one of our best supervisors." "Best at what, Michael?" asked Mrs. Margaret, taking a step forward. "At intimidating employees? At creating an environment of terror? Ask the drivers outside what they think of Richard." "Drivers always complain about supervisors. It's part of the job," said Michael, indifferent. "Your father never thought that way." "My father was from another era. Today the business is different." "Yes, today you have twice the trucks and half the employee loyalty," countered Mrs. Margaret. "Have you ever stopped to think why the turnover here is so high?" "The economy is tough. People look for better salaries. People flee toxic environments, Michael, and Richard created one here." Richard stood up again, now clearly nervous. "Mr. Michael, you don't need to listen to these accusations. I do my job right. You know my numbers." "I do," said Michael, "and they're good. Richard keeps costs low, deadlines met." "At the expense of people's well-being," said Jason, finally losing patience. "Mr. Michael, do you know how many drivers had to take out loans because Richard made up absurd fines? Do you know how many quit the profession because of the psychological pressure? I met a co-worker who got gastritis from the stress Richard caused." "Weak driver," Richard murmured. "What?" Jason took a step toward him. "Easy, Jason," said Daniel, holding his arm. Let him hang himself. Mrs. Margaret turned her attention to Michael. Michael, I came here for 2 reasons. First, to demand Jason be rehired with full benefits. Second, to open your eyes to what's happening here. And if I say I won't do either, then this video will end up on social media, local newspapers and your father's desk, said Mrs. Margaret without hesitation. And you'll have to explain to him why you're protecting an abusive, unfair supervisor. Michael took a deep breath, clearly irritated. This is blackmail. This is justice, corrected Daniel. Richard suddenly stood up, pointing at Jason. You know what? Screw it. This driver's already finished anyway. I sent a notice to all freight companies in the region saying he's a thief, that he siphoned fuel, that he abandoned cargo. He won't get a job even sweeping garage floors. The silence that followed was icy. Even Michael seemed surprised by the confession. You did what? Asked Michael, his voice low. I did my job. Protected the company from a dangerous element. You committed slander and defamation, said Daniel, already grabbing a notepad to write things down. You just confessed in front of witnesses that you deliberately spread lies about a former employee. That's a crime, Mr. Richard. Richard realized too late what he had done. He tried to backtrack. I didn't mean that. I meant that... You meant exactly what you said, interrupted Mrs. Margaret. Michael, now do you see? This man isn't protecting the company. He's protecting himself. From what? Asked Jason. What's he protecting himself from? Mrs. Margaret looked at Richard with an expression bordering on pity. Because I know, Richard. I always knew. Knew what, Mrs. Margaret? Asked Michael, now genuinely confused. About the fuel thefts. The bombshell dropped in the middle of the room. Michael turned pale. Richard began sweating visibly. What are you talking about? Michael tried to maintain control. I'm saying that during my 42 years working at this company, I learned to read numbers, and in the last 2 years, the fleet's fuel consumption increased 23%, while the distance traveled increased only 8%. Someone's siphoning diesel, Michael, and that someone is falsifying the reports. That's a very serious accusation, said Michael, but his voice wavered. Yes, and I can prove it. Mrs. Margaret pulled a folder from her bag, surprising everyone. I kept tracking the company's public reports. Here are the inconsistencies. A 5th-grade mathematician could see it. She placed the papers on Michael's desk. The young businessman looked at the documents, and Jason could see the exact moment he understood the implications. These numbers, Michael murmured, are real, completed Mrs. Margaret, and they represent a loss of approximately $200,000 per year. Richard tried one last gambit. She's lying. These papers are fake. They're official reports from your own company, Richard, said Daniel, all publicly available to shareholders, and Mrs. Margaret still holds a minority stake in the company as part of her pension fund. Michael sank into his chair, running his hands over his face. Richard, you'd better leave now. Mr. Michael, Can't get out, shouted Michael, slamming his hand on the desk. We'll talk tomorrow. Today, get out of here. Richard looked around desperately, like a cornered animal. Then he ran out of the room, slamming the door hard. Michael took several deep breaths before speaking again. Mrs. Margaret, I didn't know. You didn't know? Or didn't you want to know? What do you mean? Michael, Richard was your college friend. You brought him here without a selection process, without checking references, and you put him in a supervisory position in less than 6 months. I trusted him. You were negligent, said Mrs. Margaret, but her voice held a note of understanding. And now you need to fix this. Michael looked at Jason. Did you know about this misconduct? No, sir. I just drove the truck and delivered cargo. I never dealt with fuel. Why not? The question caught Jason by surprise. Why would I do that? Many would. It's easy, it's quick money. That's not the kind of person I am, Jason replied simply. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Michael remained silent for a long moment, studying Jason. I need to do a few things. First, Jason, you're rehired, but not as a driver. What do you mean? As a fleet inspector. I need someone who knows the daily operations, who can tell when something's wrong, and most importantly, someone honest. The salary is 30% higher. Jason could hardly believe what he was hearing. Mr. Michael, I don't know what to say. Say you accept, intervened Mrs. Margaret, smiling. I accept, yes, I accept. Second, continued Michael, I need help cleaning up this mess. Mrs. Margaret, I know you're retired, but would you come back as a consultant, just a few hours a week to help me reorganize the procedures? Mrs. Margaret thought for a moment. I'll come back, but with conditions. I want every employee to have a direct reporting channel, anonymous if they want. I want you to hire an organizational psychologist to assess the work environment, and I want your father to know about all this. Michael swallowed hard. My father, he'll be furious. He'll be proud to see you take responsibility and fix things, corrected Mrs. Margaret. The Robert I know will value that. All right, I'll call him today. Great, said Daniel, gathering his papers. Then we have an agreement here. Jason rehired in a better position, back wages paid double as moral compensation, and Mrs. Margaret as consultant. As for Richard, I suggest a full audit before taking any legal measures. I'll request that right away, said Michael, picking up the phone. When they left the administration building, Jason was still in shock. The sun was setting, tinting the sky orange and pink. I can't believe what just happened, he said. Yes, you can, replied Mrs. Margaret, adjusting her purse. You did the right thing, Jason, and life has a way of rewarding that. Mrs. Margaret, I'll never be able to thank you enough. Then don't thank me. Just pay it forward. When you're in that inspector position, remember what it was like to be a driver. Treat people with dignity. That's the best way to thank me. Daniel shook Jason's hand. Congratulations, young man. You've got courage. Not everyone maintains their integrity when times are tough. Daniel, thank you so much for everything. If I ever need a lawyer, you have my card. Anything, just call. The three said goodbye in the parking lot. Jason took a bus back home, his mind still processing everything that had happened in less than 24 hours, from fired and slandered to fleet inspector, with a better salary and the chance to make a difference. When he got home, Mrs. Sharon was already at the door. So, how did it go? Jason hugged her tightly. Mom, I got my job back and a better position. I knew it. I always knew God would reward your kindness. That night, Jason could hardly sleep from all the excitement. Tomorrow would be his first day as an inspector, a position he had never imagined holding. But the story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The next morning, when Jason arrived at the freight company, he found a strange atmosphere. Drivers were whispering in groups, looking at him with curiosity. Some came to greet him. Jason, I heard you're back and you even took down Richard. It wasn't quite like that. Man, you're a hero. Everyone here hated that guy. Throughout the morning, Jason received greetings, hugs, and stories from other drivers who had suffered at Richard's hands. And each story made him more determined to do things differently. Michael called him into the office around 11. Jason, have a seat. We need to talk about your new role. Yes, sir. First, none of this sir business. Call me Michael. Second, you're going to be my eyes and ears out there. I need to know what's really happening. No filters, no lies. Understood. And about Richard? Michael hesitated. We gained access to his computers. Jason, it's worse than we thought. Much worse. How so? He wasn't just siphoning fuel. He was taking bribes from a phantom maintenance company. He overcharged for repairs and kept the difference. For 3 years. Jason whistled softly. How much? Almost $1 million. How did he hide it? He had an accomplice, someone in accounting who altered the entries. Who? Michael sighed heavily. We're still investigating, but there's more. Remember you said Richard sent a circular to other freight companies lying about you? I remember. I got a copy. He accused you of theft, drunk driving, harassment of female employees. Horrible things, Jason. It's all documented, with fake company stamps. Anger rose hot in Jason's throat. Why did he do that? Why did he hate me so much? Because you were good at what you did. Because the other drivers respected you. because you were a threat to his little reign of terror. Jason took a deep breath, trying to control his emotions. And now? What's going to happen to him? He's already with lawyers. He'll have to return everything he stole and still face criminal charges. But that's not your problem anymore. Your problem now is helping me clean up the mess he left behind. During the following weeks, Jason immersed himself in his new job. He spoke with every driver, listened to their complaints, their suggestions, their stories. He discovered a world of small abuses, of everyday injustices that had become normalized. And he changed everything he could. He implemented a fair evaluation system. He eliminated arbitrary fines. He created a direct communication channel between drivers and management. And most importantly, he treated every person with the respect they deserved. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were drivers who took advantage of the old system, who liked the chaos Richard created because they could operate in the shadows. And these drivers didn't like Jason. One of them was George Mitchell, a veteran driver with almost 20 years at the company. Tall, strong, with a grey mustache and an intimidating attitude. "You think you're better than everyone else, don't you, kid?" he said one day, confronting Jason in the yard. "I don't think that at all, George. I'm just doing my job. Your job is to annoy me with these spreadsheets, these evaluations. I've been driving trucks for 20 years. And that's exactly why your experience is valuable. But we need to follow safety protocols. Protocols are for my pocket. Richard knew how to work. He left us alone." Richard was stealing from the company. That affected everyone's paycheck here, including yours. George spat on the ground. "You took down Richard because he fired you. It's personal revenge. I did what was right, and if you keep refusing to use safety equipment, you'll have to talk to Michael." George Mitchell took a threatening step toward Jason. Other drivers around stopped to watch. The tension was palpable. "Are you threatening me, boy?" "I'm guiding you. The rules are for everyone, George Mitchell, including you." It was Douglas, another veteran and respected driver, who intervened. "George Mitchell, cut it out. Jason is right. You know he is. Stop being stubborn." "Stubborn? You're afraid of being held accountable," said Douglas, his voice calm but firm. "Because back in Richard's time you slacked off, showed up late, and nobody said anything because he was busy stealing. But now you have to actually work, and that bothers you." George Mitchell opened and closed his mouth several times, not knowing how to respond. Finally, he turned his back and walked away, stomping his feet. "Thank you," Jason said to Douglas. "No need to thank me. Most people here are happy with the changes. It's just George Mitchell and 2 or 3 others who are bothered. They'll get used to it, or they'll leave." And that's exactly what happened. George Mitchell resigned 2 weeks later, saying he was going to work in another city. The other problematic drivers either adjusted or requested transfers. Meanwhile, the logistics company began to flourish. Turnover dropped by half. Deliveries became more punctual. And most importantly, people were happier. Mrs. Margaret kept her word and returned as a consultant. She spent 3 afternoons a week at the company, implementing changes, training managers, talking to employees. Her presence was like a balm, reminding everyone of how things used to be, when the company was still small and everyone cared about each other. One day, about 2 months after everything happened, Michael called Jason and Mrs. Margaret into his office. "My father is back from his trip. He wants to meet both of you." Jason felt a chill in his stomach. Robert Thompson was a legend in the transportation industry, a man who had built an empire from 3 old trucks. When? Now. He's in his office at headquarters. The headquarters was in Indianapolis, an hour's drive away. Michael took them in his car, and during the entire trip, Jason couldn't relax. "Is he angry?" he asked. "My father doesn't get angry, Jason. He gets disappointed, and that's worse." "Michael, did you tell him everything?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "I did. The theft, Richard, the bad atmosphere, everything. And I also told him about the changes we made." "And what did he say?" "He said he wanted to meet the driver who had the courage to do the right thing, even though he knew it would cost him his job." The headquarters was imposing, a modern glass and steel building. They went up to the top floor, where Robert's office was. The secretary, an elegant woman in her 60s, greeted them with a smile. "Mrs. Margaret, long time no see." "Hi, Judith, how are you?" The two hugged, and Jason realized that Mrs. Margaret had friends everywhere. He's waiting for you. You can go in." Robert Thompson's office was surprisingly simple. No excessive luxuries, just a solid wooden desk, some photos on the walls, and an impressive view of the city. Robert himself was standing at the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man in his 70s, completely white hair, upright posture, emanating a calm authority. "Mrs. Margaret," he said, turning around. His face broke into a genuine smile. "It's been a long time." "Hello, Robert. I missed you." They hugged like old friends, and Jason saw tears in both their eyes. "I'm sorry about Edward," said Robert. "He was a good man." "He was, and he always spoke highly of you." Robert turned his attention to Jason. "And you must be Jason Miller." "Yes, sir." Jason extended his hand, which was firmly shaken. "My son told me your story. I want to hear it from your mouth. No fear, no filter. Tell me what happened that night." Jason told everything. The rain, the lady on the road, the decision to give a ride, the firing. He didn't try to play the hero, just told the facts as they happened. Robert listened silently, nodding occasionally. "Why did you stop?" he asked when Jason finished. "What do you mean, sir?" "Why did you stop the truck to help Mrs. Margaret? You knew the rule about rides. You knew you could be fired. Why take the risk?" Jason thought for a moment before answering. "Because it was the right thing to do. My mother raised me alone after my father abandoned us. She cleaned houses, sold food on the street, worked 3 jobs at once to raise me. And she always said, no matter how much you're suffering, there's always someone suffering more. And if you can help, you help. Simple as that." Robert's eyes gleamed. "Your mother is a wise woman. Michael, did you hear that?" "I did, Dad." "Did? This kid has more wisdom in his early 30s than many executives I know. Jason, do you like working at the freight company?" "Very much, sir. It's the best company I've ever worked for." "Then I'll make you an offer. I want you to be the coordinator for the entire fleet, not just this branch. All 12 branches we have. You'll travel, get to know every operation, implement the changes you made here." Jason was speechless. "Mr. Robert, I didn't even finish high school. I don't have the education for that. Education we can get. You'll get your GED, then college if you want. The company will pay. But what I can't teach is character, and you have that in spades." "I accept," said Jason, his voice choked. "Yes, I accept." "Great. Michael, arrange everything." "I'll take care of it right away, Dad." Robert turned his attention to Mrs. Margaret. "And you, old friend, I need you to come back for real. Not just as a consultant, as the Director of Human Resources. You know every branch, every long-time employee, every procedure. I need you to help me fix what broke while I was absent." "Robert, I'm 72 years old. And I'm 74. So what? You have more energy than 40-year-olds. I need you." Mrs. Margaret looked out the window, thoughtful. "I'll only accept if you promise me one thing." "What?" "That you'll spend more time here. That you'll stop traveling all year. This company needs you, Robert. Your son is good, but he's still learning. And he didn't have you around to guide him." Robert looked at his son, who averted his gaze. "You're right. I distanced myself too much. I thought I was giving Michael freedom to grow, but I was just running away from responsibilities." "Dad." "No, Michael. Let me finish. When your mother passed away 3 years ago, I went into a spiral. I couldn't be here. Everything reminded me of her. So I traveled, and left you alone with a burden too heavy to carry by yourself. I'm sorry. Dad, and you made mistakes, son. You were wrong to bring Richard in without doing checks. You were wrong not to pay attention to the signs that something was wrong. But you also did right. You were right to listen to Mrs. Margaret, to rehire Jason, to have the courage to tell me the truth. That shows you have what it takes. You just need guidance." Michael nodded, his eyes red. "I'll learn, Dad. I promise." "I know you will, and we'll do this together, okay?" Father and son hugged, a moment so intimate that Jason and Mrs. Margaret looked away, giving them privacy. When they separated, Robert cleared his throat. Well, then, it's decided. Mrs. Margaret comes back as director. Jason is promoted to national coordinator. And as for Richard, the lawyers are handling that, said Michael. He will return the money and will face criminal charges. Good. And his accomplice in accounting, also identified, already fired and will face charges too. And the drivers who were harmed by Richard's lies. Michael looked at Jason. Jason made a list. There are 17 people who were slandered or unfairly fired over the last 3 years. I want them all back with appropriate compensation. Jason, you will personally visit each one and extend the invitation. Yes, sir. And one more thing. Robert went to his desk and picked up an envelope. Jason, this is for your mother. For my mother. When Mrs. Margaret told me your story, I remembered why I built this company. It wasn't for the money. It was because when I was young, poor, with nothing, someone gave me a chance. Someone believed in me. And I promised that if I ever succeeded, I would help other people. So this here is a scholarship for your mother. Any course she wants to take, anything she left behind to raise you. Jason opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a card and an official company letter, offering a full scholarship. Mr. Robert, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, just go home and hug your mother, and tell her she raised a good man. Jason couldn't hold back the tears. He cried right there in front of everyone without shame. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a weight being lifted from his shoulders. Mrs. Margaret hugged him, stroking his back like a mother would. It's all right, my son. You deserve this, you and your mother. When Jason calmed down, Robert still had one thing to say. I want all of you to understand something. What happened here wasn't just about correcting mistakes. It was about rescuing the soul of this company. And you 3 are the people who will help me do that. We're not 3, Dad, said Michael. We're 4. You're here now too. Robert smiled, a tired but hopeful smile. Yes, I am, and I'm not leaving again. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following months were transformative. Jason traveled to each branch, implementing the changes, talking with drivers, training new supervisors. It wasn't easy. He encountered resistance, skepticism, people who didn't believe things could change. But for every person who doubted, there were 2 who embraced the changes. And slowly, branch by branch, the company culture began to change. Mrs. Margaret, in turn, restructured the entire human resources department. She implemented mental health programs, created clear policies against harassment and abuse, established direct communication channels. She worked with an energy that belied her age, inspiring everyone around her. Michael matured under his father's guidance. He learned to balance numbers with people, efficiency with empathy, and most importantly, he learned to listen. And Robert, true to his word, stayed, no longer as the distant and legendary owner, but as a present mentor, sharing his experience, guiding but not controlling. But not everything was resolved easily. Richard, cornered and desperate, tried one last move. He hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against the company, alleging defamation and wrongful termination. The news reached Jason on a Tuesday afternoon. He was at the South Bend branch when Michael called. Jason, I need you to come back to Indianapolis urgently. Richard is suing the company. What do you mean? He was stealing. I know, but he claims there isn't enough evidence, that he was coerced into confessing that Mrs. Margaret's recording is illegal. That's ridiculous. It is, but we need to prepare. His lawyer is good, and he's making noise in the press. When Jason arrived in Indianapolis the next day, he found the situation worse than he had imagined. Journalists wanted to interview Robert. There were articles in the local newspapers questioning the practices of the freight company, and Richard was giving interviews claiming he was the victim of a conspiracy. He's playing the victim, said Mrs. Margaret, indignant, saying the company used him as a scapegoat to hide bigger problems. Are people believing it? Asked Jason. Some are. You know how it is. A well-told lie seems like the truth. The crisis meeting in Robert's office was tense. Present were Robert, Michael, Mrs. Margaret, Jason, Daniel the lawyer, and 2 other lawyers specializing in labor issues. "What's our position?" asked Robert. One of the lawyers, Dr. Williams, spoke. "We have documented evidence of the discrepancies, but Richard's lawyer is contesting the authenticity of those documents, saying they were altered." "But they weren't," protested Michael. "I know, but in court, we need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And he's trying to muddy the waters. What about Mrs. Margaret's recording? That's more complicated. It's technically legal, but his lawyer is arguing she didn't have verbal consent, which could invalidate it as evidence depending on the judge." "So what do we do?" asked Jason. "We need more evidence, witnesses, documents, anything that corroborates our version." "I have 17 drivers who were harmed by him," said Jason. "They can testify." "That helps, but he'll claim they're all biased, that they're lying to hurt him out of revenge. That's absurd." "Welcome to the legal system," said Daniel with a bitter smile, "where the truth isn't always enough." It was Mrs. Margaret who had the idea. "What if we get his wife?" Everyone looked at her. "His wife?" "Yes, Jennifer. She worked with us in cleaning before marrying Richard. She was always a good woman, honest, hard-working. If anyone knows the truth about what he did, it's her." "She'll testify against her own husband," doubted Michael. "Maybe. If we know how to ask." Mrs. Margaret took out her phone and made a call. "Jennifer? Hi, dear. It's Margaret." "Yes, Margaret Wilson. How are you? Look, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you meet me today?" There was a long pause. "Yes, I know it's difficult, but it's important, and it's just to talk. No strings attached. What do you think?" "Great. I'll see you at the Central Square in an hour." Mrs. Margaret hung up. "She'll meet me. I'll go alone. Less intimidating that way." "Mrs. Margaret, are you sure?" asked Robert. "Absolutely. Trust me." Jennifer Barnes was a woman in her early 40s, with a tired appearance and deep-set eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She was sitting on a bench in the square when Mrs. Margaret arrived. "Hi, Jennifer." "Hi, Mrs. Margaret. Long time no see." The two sat down, an uncomfortable silence between them. "How are you?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "Honestly, terrible. My marriage is over, my husband is being sued, the neighbors look at us with disgust. My kids are being bullied at school because their father is a thief." "I'm sorry, Jennifer. And you came here to convince me to testify against him, didn't you?" Mrs. Margaret sighed. "I came here to talk, to understand your side of the story. My side is simple. I married a man I thought I knew. I found out he was a liar, a thief, an abuser. He hit me, Mrs. Margaret. When he drank, he hit me." Margaret held Jennifer's hand. "Why did you never tell me?" "Shame, fear, the normal things that keep women in bad marriages. And now? Now I'm living with my mother, with my 2 kids trying to rebuild my life, and Richard wants to sue me for abandonment. Can you believe that?" "I believe it. He is capable of anything." Jennifer wiped the tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Margaret, I know you want me to testify against him. And part of me wants to do it. But I'm afraid of what he might do, afraid of what will happen to my children. Jennifer, I can guarantee you one thing. If you testify, the company will protect you. We'll get a restraining order against him. We'll arrange security if necessary. We'll help with legal costs. Why would you do this for me? Because it's the right thing, and because no woman should suffer what you've suffered." Jennifer remained silent for a long time. "I have documents," she said finally. "When I filed for divorce, I went to his home office and copied everything I could. Emails, spreadsheets, contracts. I was keeping them as protection, in case he tried to harm me." "Do these documents prove the embezzlement?" "They prove everything, including conversations with Michael about how to hide the numbers." Mrs. Margaret felt her heart turn to ice. "With Michael? Michael knew?" "I don't know if he knew the full extent, but in the conversations I saw, he was discussing ways to optimize costs, and Richard was interpreting that as permission to do whatever he wanted. I need those documents, Jennifer. I'll give them to you. But I need guarantees." "You'll have all possible guarantees, I promise." Jennifer handed a flash drive to Mrs. Margaret. "It's all here, 3 years of evidence. Use it wisely." "I'll use it to bring about justice." When Mrs. Margaret returned to the company headquarters with the flash drive, the atmosphere changed completely. The lawyers examined the contents and confirmed it was devastating for Richard. But there was a problem. Some of the conversations actually implicated Michael, suggesting he had at least vague knowledge of what was happening. "This destroys me," said Michael, reading the emails. "People will think I was involved." "Were you?" asked Robert, his voice hard. "No. Dad, I swear I wasn't. When he talked about optimizing costs, I thought he meant negotiating better prices with suppliers, being more efficient with routes. I never imagined he was—" "Stealing," Robert finished. "The word is stealing." "Yes. I was naive. I was an idiot. But I wasn't dishonest." "I believe you," said Robert, "but we need to make this clear to everyone." It was decided that Michael would hold a press conference, admitting his supervisory errors, but denying any participation in the embezzlement. It would be risky, but it was the only way to control the narrative. The press conference was scheduled for the following Friday. Throughout the week, Michael was prepared by the lawyers and a public relations consultant. Jason watched some of these practice sessions and was impressed by the pressure Michael was facing. "How are you?" asked Jason during one of the breaks. "Terrified. I'm going to be up there in front of cameras, admitting I failed as a manager. That I let a thief operate under my nose for 3 years. But you didn't know. I should have known. It was my responsibility to know. Michael, you'll come out of this stronger. People respect those who admit mistakes and try to fix them." "I hope you're right." The press conference was held in the headquarters auditorium. There were at least 40 journalists present, TV cameras, newspaper reporters. The tension was palpable. Michael entered, accompanied by Robert and the lawyers. He was pale but firm. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I will make a statement and then take questions." He took a deep breath and began. 3 months ago, we discovered that a supervisor at our branch was involved in embezzling company funds. This embezzlement occurred over 3 years, totaling approximately $1 million. The supervisor in question, Richard Barnes, has been fired and is facing criminal charges. Voices rose, but Michael raised his hand. "Please, let me finish. During the investigations, we discovered that I, as the manager, failed to identify the signs of what was happening. I trusted the supervisor, believed in his reports, and did not perform the necessary checks. This was negligence on my part. I did not participate in the embezzlement. I did not know the extent of what was happening, but I should have known. And for that, I take responsibility." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "Starting today, we are implementing a series of changes: quarterly independent audits, an anonymous whistleblower channel monitored by a third party, a robust compliance program, and most importantly, a cultural shift. This company was founded with human values, and in recent years we lost that. We will reclaim those values." "Mr. Michael," a journalist raised her hand, "are you going to resign from your position?" "No, I will stay and fix the mess I helped create. Resigning would be the easy way out. I will stay and do the hard work of rebuilding trust. Is your father taking back the company?" Robert leaned toward the microphone. "No. I will work alongside my son, guide him, but the company is his now, and he showed maturity in admitting the mistakes. That makes me proud." The questions continued for an hour, some easy, some difficult, some hostile. Michael answered them all with honesty, even when the truth was uncomfortable. When the press conference ended, he was exhausted but relieved. "How was it?" he asked Jason, who had watched from the back of the auditorium. "It was courageous. It was real. People will respect that." And Jason was right. In the following days, the media coverage shifted, from fierce criticism to recognition of the transparency. Of course, there were skeptics, there always are, but most people seemed to appreciate the honesty. As for Richard, confronted with the evidence Jennifer had provided, he dropped the lawsuit. His lawyer advised a settlement. He would return the stolen money in installments and would not go to jail, but he also could not work in any logistics company again. It wasn't the perfect justice everyone wanted, but it was closure. Jennifer, in turn, was rehired by the company, now in the administrative department with a decent salary. Her daughters received scholarships to a private school. and she could finally rebuild her life away from her abusive husband. 6 months after the start of this whole story, Midwest Freight was transformed. Employee turnover fell to less than 5% per year, accident numbers decreased, customer satisfaction increased, and most importantly, the organizational climate was completely different. Jason was at his desk reviewing reports from a branch in Michigan when Michael entered his office. "Jason, can I interrupt you?" "Of course, Michael. Have a seat." "I wanted to show you something." He placed a business magazine on the desk. On the cover, a photo of the company with the headline Midwest Freight, How a Crisis Became an Example of Human Management. "Wow," said Jason, flipping through the magazine. "I never imagined seeing us in a magazine like this." "There's a part here that talks about you, about how a simple driver became a national coordinator by doing the right thing." Jason read the passage, feeling a mix of pride and embarrassment. "They're exaggerating. I just did what any decent person would do." "No, Jason, most people wouldn't. Most would drive right by thinking about their own job, their own bills. You stopped, and that changed everything." "I didn't change things alone. Mrs. Margaret, you, your father, Daniel, everyone helped." "Yes, but you were the catalyst. Sometimes one single person doing the right thing is all it takes to start a bigger change." That afternoon, the whole team gathered in the yard for a celebration. It was the 1-year anniversary of the company's new era, as some were calling it. Robert gave an emotional speech thanking everyone. Mrs. Margaret cried, which was rare. Michael distributed bonuses to the entire team, recognizing their hard work. And Jason, watching those people, that joy, that sense of community, felt he had found his place in the world. His mother, Mrs. Sharon, was there too, a special guest. She had started a teaching course, fulfilling a long-held dream, and she was radiant. "Mom, are you having fun?" "Very much, my son. You know I'm proud of you, right?" "I know, Mom." "It's not just because of the promotion or the salary. It's because you stayed true. Even when it was hard, even when it seemed like you had everything to lose, you did the right thing. That's worth more than any money." "I learned from the best," said Jason, hugging his mother. Mrs. Margaret approached them. "Can I steal Jason for a moment?" "Of course, Mrs. Margaret." The two walked to a quieter corner of the yard. "Jason, there's something I never told you." "What?" "That night, on the road, when you stopped to help me, I was on the verge of giving up on everything." "Giving up?" "My Edward had passed away 2 weeks earlier. My children live far away. I was feeling useless, a burden to everyone. I had gone to visit that special place, thinking about bad things." Jason felt a tightness in his heart. "Mrs. Margaret, when you stopped, when you offered help without asking for anything in return, when you risked your job for a stranger, Jason, you saved me. Not just by taking me home. You reminded me that there is still kindness in the world, that it's still worth being here." Tears were streaming down her face now. "That's why I got so involved in this story. It wasn't just about justice. It was about giving back. It was about making sure your kindness didn't go unnoticed, that it wasn't punished." Jason hugged Mrs. Margaret, both of them crying right there in the middle of the celebration. "Mrs. Margaret, you're the one who saved me. You gave me an opportunity, believed in me, changed my whole life." "We saved each other then," she said, smiling through the tears. "What a good deal." The sun was setting as the party began to disperse. People were leaving in small groups, talking, laughing, planning the future. Jason stayed behind for a few minutes, just watching. He thought about everything that had happened since that rainy night, the firing, the despair, the fresh start, and he realized something. None of it would have happened if he had passed by Mrs. Margaret. His job would be secure, his life would be the same. But sometimes life doesn't ask to be safe, it asks to be meaningful. And at that moment, seeing the happy people, knowing he had made a difference, Jason understood that all the suffering, all the uncertainty, had been worth it. Because in the end, it's not the mistakes that define who we are. It's the choices we make when no one is watching. It's the kind of person we decide to be when it costs to be good. And Jason had chosen to be good, even when it hurt, even when it seemed foolish. Even when the whole world said he should only look out for himself, he had chosen to see the other. And that simple choice had changed everything. When he got home that night, he found his mother in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Mom, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, son." "Do you regret it? All the difficulties you went through to raise me? All the sacrifices?" Mrs. Sharon put down the spoon and turned to him. "Jason, look at you. Look at the man you've become. Look at how many people you're helping, how many lives you're changing. How could I regret that? It's just, sometimes I think about how hard it was. 3 jobs, you always tired, always struggling. It was hard. But you know what would have been more difficult? Raising a son without character, raising a son who stepped on others to get ahead, raising a son who looked at someone in need and turned away. That would be unbearable. Thank you, Mom, for everything." "No need to thank me. Just keep being who you are." That night, Jason slept in peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you're living according to your values, that you're making a difference, that you're leaving the world a little better than you found it. The next morning, a Monday, Jason was ready for another week of work when he received a call from Michael. "Jason, I need you to come here to headquarters. There's a surprise for you." "What kind of surprise?" "The good kind. Just come." When Jason arrived, he found not only Michael, but also Robert, Mrs. Margaret, and to his surprise, several of the drivers he had helped rehire. "What's going on?" Robert stepped forward. "Jason, we all here wanted to do something special for you, to thank you not only for what you've done for this company, but for the example you've been to all of us." Michael handed an envelope to Jason. "This is from all of us, from the executives, the drivers, the cleaning staff, the administration. Everyone contributed." Jason opened the envelope and found a significant amount of money, along with a letter signed by dozens of employees. "I can't accept this, it's too much." "Yes, you can," said Douglas, the veteran driver who had defended Jason that time. "You changed a lot of people's lives here. Let us give back." "And there's more," said Mrs. Margaret, pointing to a corner of the room. There was a simple but elegant trophy with a plaque that read, "To Jason Miller, who reminded us that doing the right thing is always worth it. With eternal gratitude from the entire team at Midwest Freight." Jason was speechless. He hugged each person there, repeating "thank you" so many times he lost count. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, we did," said Robert, "because recognizing good deeds inspires more people to do good. That's how we create a chain of kindness." The months kept passing. The company kept growing, not just in size but in reputation. They started receiving requests from other companies wanting to understand how they had made that cultural transformation. Jason found himself giving talks, something he never imagined doing. He spoke about his experience, about the importance of empathy in the workplace, about how small acts of kindness can have big consequences. In one of these talks, in an auditorium full of business people and managers, someone raised their hand. "Mr. Jason, don't you think you were naive? After all, you risked everything for a stranger. Most of the time, acts like that aren't rewarded." Jason thought carefully before answering. "You're right. Most of the time, doing the right thing doesn't come with a reward. Sometimes you lose your job and that's it, end of story. Sometimes no one finds out. Sometimes you suffer consequences and nothing good happens." He paused. "But you know what I learned? The reward isn't the point. I didn't help Mrs. Margaret expecting a promotion. I helped because it was the right thing to do, and if I had ended up unemployed and nothing else had happened, I still would have made the same choice. Because at the end of the day I have to live with myself, and I couldn't look at myself in the mirror knowing I left an elderly lady in the rain to protect my job." The auditorium fell silent. The real question isn't, is it worth doing the right thing? The real question is, what kind of person do I want to be? And once you answer that question honestly, the choices become easier. There was a moment of silence, and then the auditorium erupted in applause. After the lecture, several people came to speak with Jason, sharing their own stories, asking questions, seeking guidance. He stayed there for 2 hours, talking to each one, offering what wisdom and encouragement he could. When he was finally leaving, a young woman in her early 20s approached him. "Mr. Jason, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course." I'm going through a similar situation. My boss is doing wrong things, and I know I should report it, but I'm afraid of losing my job. What should I do?" Jason looked into her eyes and saw his reflection from months ago. Fear, uncertainty, the weight of a difficult decision. "I can't tell you what to do. Every situation is unique. But I can tell you this. You are stronger than you think, and there are always people willing to help. You just need to find them. And most importantly, no matter what happens, you will always have your integrity. No one can take that away from you. But what if I lose everything? Then you rebuild. That's what I did. Was it hard? Yes. But was it worth it? Absolutely." The young woman nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." When Jason returned home that night, he reflected on that conversation. He thought about how many people every day face moral dilemmas, how many choose the easier path, and how many, courageously, choose the right path even when it costs them dearly. And he realized that his story wasn't about him. It was about all of them. It was about every person who ever had to choose between what's convenient and what's right, and about how those choices, added together, can change the world. A year and a half after that rainy night, Jason was driving again, but this time in a company car, making a routine visit to one of the farthest branches. The road was the same where it all began, and when he passed the exact spot where he had seen Mrs. Margaret, he stopped the car. He got out and stood there, remembering the rain, the fear, the decision, everything that came after. His phone rang. It was Michael. "Jason, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Michael. Why?" "Your tracker stopped. I thought there might be a problem." No, I just stopped to reflect a little." "About what?" "About how life changes so fast. About how a single decision can change everything." There was a pause on the other end. "Jason, are you really okay?" Jason smiled. "I am, Michael. Better than ever, actually. I'm just grateful. Very grateful." "We're grateful to you too, Jason. Never forget that." When Jason hung up, he looked at that road one more time. He thought about all the possibilities, about all the lives that could have been, but in the end, only one life mattered, the one he chose to live, a life of integrity, of compassion, of doing the right thing even when it cost him dearly. And as he got back in the car and continued his journey, Jason knew with absolute certainty that if he had to choose again, he would do exactly the same thing. Because some things are more important than jobs, than security, than convenience. Some things are more important than everything. And kindness is at the top of that list. 2 years after that transformative night, Midwest Freight Logistics had become a national benchmark for humanized management. Universities studied the case, journalists wrote articles, other companies came on visits to learn from the model. Jason, now with a degree in people management that he had completed in record time, was often invited to events, conferences, TV shows. But his greatest pride wasn't the fame or the recognition. It was the email he received almost every week from some employee thanking him for the difference the changes had made in their lives. It was seeing drivers working with a smile on their faces. It was knowing that no one was afraid to go to work anymore. Mrs. Margaret, at 74 years old, remained active and vibrant as the Director of Human Resources. She had implemented programs that went beyond the company, offering support to employees' families, creating partnerships with schools for the workers' children, and establishing an emergency fund for those going through hardships. And Robert, true to his word, remained present. No longer as the distant owner, but as a grandfather figure to the company, sharing stories, offering guidance, reminding everyone where they had started and where they wanted to go. Michael, in turn, had matured tremendously. The arrogant young executive had transformed into a compassionate leader who balanced results with care for people. And surprisingly, the financial results were better than ever. proving that doing the right thing and being successful were not mutually exclusive. One Friday afternoon, near the end of the workday, Jason received an unexpected phone call. "Jason Miller?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Walter Reynolds. I'm a reporter for the program Special Encounters on American National Television. We would like to do a story about your experience." Jason had given several interviews before, but this one was different. Special Encounters was a prime-time program watched by millions of people. A story? Yes. We want to tell your complete story. The firing, the rehiring, the company's transformation. And mainly, we want to discuss the impact that small acts of kindness can have. I need to think about it. Of course. But if you accept, we would also like to include Mrs. Margaret, Mr. Robert, and some of the people whose lives you've touched. It would be a beautiful tribute. Jason spoke with everyone involved. Initially, there was hesitation. Too much exposure could bring problems. But Mrs. Margaret, as always, got straight to the point. "Jason, how many people watch that program?" "Millions, I think. And how many of those people might be facing moral dilemmas right at this moment? How many might need to hear that doing the right thing is worth it?" "Many, probably." "Then it's our duty to share, not for ego but for responsibility." And so, 1 month later, a TV crew descended upon the freight company. They recorded interviews, filmed the daily operations, talked with employees. The reporter Walter was an experienced professional, around 50 years old, who clearly cared about the story he was telling. "Jason, what would you say to someone watching right now who is facing a tough choice between what's right and what's convenient?" Jason looked directly into the camera. "I would say that I understand the fear. I understand the temptation to protect yourself first, but I would also say that you are stronger than you think, that there are people willing to help, and that in the end you have to live with your choices. Choose to live with something that gives you peace. But what if it goes wrong? If there's no happy ending? Then you know you did the best you could with what you had, and that has to be enough. Because the alternative, living with the guilt of having done nothing, is much worse." The program aired on a Thursday night. Jason watched it at home, with his mother and some close friends. It was surreal to see his life turned into a TV narrative, with dramatic music and all. But the reaction went beyond any expectation. The freight company's phone rang non-stop in the following days. Emails, messages, letters. People sharing their own stories, asking for advice, simply thanking them for being inspired. One letter in particular touched Jason deeply. It was from a 19-year-old young woman, a nursing student. "Mr. Jason, I watched your program and cried. I cried because last week I saw a college classmate cheating on an exam. I knew I should report it, but I was afraid. Afraid of being called a snitch, of losing friends, of being isolated. But after hearing your story, I went and spoke with the professor. It wasn't easy. Some colleagues were really angry with me, but others came to thank me privately, saying they had also seen it but didn't have the courage. And you know what we found out? That student had been systematically cheating for 2 years. He was going to graduate and work as a nurse, taking care of lives, without having the necessary knowledge. My report may have saved future lives, and I never would have had the courage if it weren't for your story. Thank you for showing me that doing the right thing is worth it." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Would you do the same as Jason? Have you ever been through a similar situation? Share your experiences and reflections in the comments. If this story touched you, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow other moving stories like this one.